BBOR BlackBoxOnlineRadio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Alright, hello everybody, and welcome to this special weekend presentation of Black Box Online Radio. This is part of an ongoing series called Zodiac Killer New Discovery, the Moraga Letters, and I've been corresponding with someone who uses the online name Sphere the Cube, also known as Sphery, who has uncovered some documents and pieces of writing that may have a genuine connection to the Zodiac Killer mystery, and hence the name, the Moraga Letters, because somebody left a comment on the most recent segment saying, "What are the Moraga Letters?" And that was written on part 3. Well, they refer to these handwriting samples that not only could have come from the Zodiac, but Sphery has identified the letter writers, and there are 2 different sets of samples that I've been exploring. One of them comes from the suspect, and one from the suspect's brother. The suspect in question is named Robert Volvins, Volvins, and Sphery has a lot more than just simply looking at some similarities in the handwriting, which I discussed in part 1, as well as the word choices and the way that someone would insert different words into a sentence. And I do mean that with insert, like the way that the lines are drawn on the paper. All of these are very similar to not only Robert Volvins, but his family, because as I've explained in some of the previous segments, the influences on his word choice and the way that he would compose the letters and the structure and the ideas involved with them all could have come together to form the Zodiac persona, and I'd say that that is perhaps a fair interpretation of Sphery's claim that the Zodiac, if indeed it were Robert Volvins, let's say hypothetically if the Zodiac killer were Robert Volvins, then he would have taken these different influences from his brother and from his sister and incorporated them into the Zodiac killer's letters. So that's what I've been exploring in this series here, the Moraga Letters. But Sphery has also proposed solutions to the Z18 code, the Z32 cipher, as well as a more elaborate connection to the Mount Diablo code, and in this episode I will be talking about Sphery's interpretation of the artwork on the Zodiac Killer's Halloween card. And it's rather fitting that it's being discussed here in October. This episode is coming out at the end of October 2022, and the Zodiac Killer mailed the Halloween card on October 27th of 1970 to Paul Avery, but he spelled his name Averly, and I would like to read something that has been written by Sphery for this program. A proposed interpretation of the Halloween card sent to Paul Avery on October 27th by the Zodiac Killer. From your secret pal, I know you ache to know my name, so I'll clue you in. But why spoil the game? An explanation of the tetragrammaton and its potential meaning to the crimes of the Zodiac Killer. And that word, tetragrammaton, that will be something that we're going to explain throughout the duration of this episode. And there is a subtitle, For My Mother Who Taught Truth and God Above All. And I've really found that Sphery has incorporated a lot more of a religious aspect into his Zodiac Killer observations than a lot of other people. And on some of the previous Zodiac Mondays and the Zodiac Killer news reports, I was even asking you guys some challenge questions. Do you think the Zodiac Killer was a Catholic? What do you make of the Christian influences on the Zodiac Killer's letters and writing? And that's because I was corresponding with Sphery as well as looking at some posts that he made online. And Sphery definitely has a more religious angle. I mean, looking at Christian influences on the Zodiac Killer's persona. So let's look at Sphery's possible interpretation of the artwork on the Halloween card. The first is that the skeleton that is under the word 14, with the number 4 and the word teen spelled out T-E-E-N, could be posed to look like a crucifix, or posed to look like Jesus on the cross. The author is centered on what has been referred to as the Zodiac killer's tendency to zig and zag. It is here, no, it is there, no, I don't know. In the author's opinion, the Zodiac is a highly talented, abstract, conceptual thinker who is adept at finding meaning and patterns in the arrangement of symbols and the ideas they represent. The Zodiac moves from east to west, yet the Moraga letters series centers around a suspect named Robert Fulvins. So let's take a moment before we start to remember a few things about Robert Fulvins. So far, we have a suspect who was approximately 22 years old and had moved to California from the Midwest in 1966 and returned home to the Midwest in late 1970, where he stayed in a small remote town until he returned to California in 1974. He came from a large family of military veterans, engineers, inventors, and newspapermen. He had a background in map surveying, hunting, archery, and firearms, though he himself never joined the military. He was raised in a strict Catholic family and attended Catholic school and daily mass and served as an altar boy through high school. He also had a traumatic past in relation to the Catholic Church. From a young age, it was clear that he was highly intelligent, winning awards for math and science. His well-furnished mind took a deep interest in language and linguistics, as well as world history, astronomy, philosophy, archaeology, and comparative religion. He was a talented mechanic and worked on and maintained cars, engines, trucks, and heavy equipment. He was very athletic and competed in collegiate sports. He liked to ski as well as scuba dive. He was extremely well-read and a musician. He traveled frequently between Northern California, Southern California, and Mexico. Despite his many attributes, he struggled to thrive as a young man. He was often behind on his school deadlines and failed to meet expectations with his parents for marriage, despite being considered the most intelligent of a highly intelligent family. And to provide a little bit of context, I have asked Fury this question about Robert Fulvins. Did he ever get married? And the answer to that was no. So you can interpret that the way you want, but that's just stating it as a fact. As we move into the analysis of the Halloween card, the author invites the listener to keep those anecdotes in the back of your mind. In the famous Halloween card, the first Zodiac teases with the offering of his name on the front of the Halloween card, and then somewhat predictably withholds it. Again, it reads, "From your secret pal, I know you hate to know my name, I'll clue you in." And on the inside it says, "But why spoil the game?" While the Zodiac is having a great time frustrating everyone, the author has asserted that the position and perspective that leans toward the suspicion that the Zodiac always seems to tell the truth in the end, however much as twisted it might be, in order to humiliate the world for the Zodiac's own entertainment. So let's revisit the Halloween card together and see if perhaps the Zodiac killer told the truth and did in fact clue us in to his name, particularly the symbols which are positioned next to the letter Z. What is it? There have been many attempts to explain it. To the author, meaning Spheri, this appears to be the divine name of God, the tetragrammaton written in reverse. The tetragrammaton is considered one of the most mystical and powerful symbols in human history, and the Zodiac killer has taken the name of God and written it backwards as a form of blasphemy, the blasphemy of all blasphemies, because it amuses him on one level. I repeat, it amuses him on one level, but perhaps he has an even more sinister design. The tetragrammaton is presented in the Bible when Moses speaks to the burning bush and asks God for his name. God responds by saying, "I am that I am." The tetragrammaton is symbolic in a written form of the name Yahweh. The tetragrammaton appears many times in the Bible, first in Genesis and finally in Revelations. This will become important as we refer to it later in the presentation and with our further analysis on the Halloween card. The tetragrammaton is considered by many students of world history, archaeology, and religious scholars to be at least one of the most arguably and most powerful mystical symbols on the entire earth, and it still bears relevance in today's society, and it offers us the sound of the true name of God, Yahweh. So what is in a name? One of the greatest powers about names and naming, and probably the most obvious, is that they give us identity. God gave humans the ability and power to name, just as God separates light from darkness and dry land from water. The biblical text affirms that humans were created in the image of God and may seek to bring order to our chaotic and world dynamic through the process of naming. Without names, there is no order, and instead there is only chaos. If anyone has seen the movie The Exorcist, the Zodiac Killer called it the greatest satirical comedy he had ever seen. You might imagine that the that you might imagine that one of the aspects that he enjoyed the most about the plot was the priest trying to extract the name of the demon, for without the demon's name, the priest has no ability to cast the demon out of anything more than law enforcement could bring the Zodiac Killer to justice without naming him. Without the name, there is no power. So basically, even though we don't think about it too much in certain religions and rituals, and society at large, there is a tremendous power in each given name. Even more, perhaps, is in a name that is withheld. Yet the Zodiac might be gaining power by not being trapped in the binary design of giving his name or not. In essence, the Zodiac follows these principles, but takes it to the next level. The Zodiac believes that he will gain power by withholding his name through a process of mocking society by giving his name and knowing that no one will ever uncover the name. The divine name of God, the tetragrammaton. The tetragrammaton literally means consisting of 4 letters and transliterated as YHWH, the name of God in the Hebrew Bible. The oldest known inscription of the tetragrammaton dates back to 840 BCE. Christian Detroyer says that the writing of the name God as YH, one can read the name of God, YH or YAHJAH, the first syllable, Yahweh, appears 50 times in the Old Testament, 26 times alone in Exodus, and 24 times there found the expression Hallelujah. When one concentrates on the oldest uses of YH for the name of God, they will focus in on 2 characters, and the name reading from left to right. For now, this explanation will only focus on the first character, Y, which is written as follows. And, okay, but what are the 4 dots on the Halloween card? The author believes that these are the Zodiac's own diacritical marks. A diacritical mark, also known as a diacritic, refers to the mark, shape, stroke, or sign that could be attached to the letter for a particular reason. The specific reason behind the usage of a particular diacritical mark will depend on whether the mark itself, often which language is used in, and some reasons that the diacritical mark be used, indicating which symbol of a word should be stressed, if a vowel is long or short, or to separate one word form from another that has an identical spelling and or pronunciation. The Zodiac's whole context is symbolism and is always conveying meaning with almost his own flavor of hieroglyphics, an image of the Mayan hieroglyphics that one can encounter in Mexico. And here are some markings on a wall cave that has been inhabited in the East Bay Hill by the East Bay Hill people, otherwise known as the Volvans, for at least 10,000 years in the southeast foothills of Mount Diablo. In any case, it is helpful when the Halloween card and all of the Zodiac communications are actually read overall with a sort of context for an approach to symbols and meaning in mind. And I will throw in the reminder and interjection that Robert Volvins, Volvins, is not his legal name. That is an alias, and the reason why he's been given an alias by us here in this series, which was created by Spheri and then shared with you guys by me, is because Robert Volvins is still currently alive, and he is a private citizen who has never been convicted of these crimes, but I just wanted to address the similarity in the spelling of these words. The Zodiac seemed to have his own ideograms, phonetics, diacritics, and deterministic methods of writing and communicating in his cards and letters. The author believes that the 4-dot diacritics are used to convey phonetic pronunciation of the 4 dots that the Zodiac desires, say of Morse code where 4 dots equals H, and then you could read YH or JA, or simply diacritical marks to produce a desired sound of the letter Y. Not an easy thing to do. Just try it. To lift and elongate it, not the written sound of YAH. A professional linguist would know better, but you get the idea, hopefully. It is like in French where the accents change the pronunciation. This is a well-known concept in linguistics, and that is definitely true about the French language, where they can not only change the pronunciation, but maybe even show some deeper meaning about the letters and the vowel sounds, but the accent aigu and the accent grave and the circumflex. But due to the interpretation of major elements of the card, it appears that the Zodiac Killer is giving the name of God but writing it backwards. This author supposes that the aim is blasphemy and power. The Zodiac is reversing the divine name in another act of sacrilegious and blasphemous evil, and probably as an occult act of mystical power or self-projection. The False Prophet. While the Zodiac Killer's Halloween card is sent on Halloween, it is important to remember that it comes on the heels of the button letter and the Mount Diablo challenge. And of course, it's been already stated very clearly in this presentation, sent before Halloween. Halloween is October 31st, and the card was mailed on October 27th, but around the time of Halloween. And the button letter and the Mount Diablo code were covered in Part 2 and Part 3 of the Moraga Letters series here on BlackBoxOnlineRadio. At one point in Part 3 of the Moraga Letters, the author proposes that the Zodiac Killer's bus bomb was based on the mechanics of a solar eclipse, possibly inspired by the Great Eclipse of March 1970. See eclipse stamps on the Zodiac's communication during this period. This experiment led the Zodiac to create a much grander scale and apocalyptic design with Mount Diablo. The Zodiac would fulfill a prophecy of Revelations regarding the false prophet who would perform several miracles in the eyes of the beast and would deceive the whole world, as he was given by the dragon, or the devil, to bring fire down from the sky. In lining up Mount Diablo, the Moraga Chapel, and the SFPD building with the sun's path, the Zodiac devises a spectacular way to detonate his bomb by bringing fire from the sky. And so the Zodiac's very own prophecy of by fire is thus fulfilled. The Devil's Trinity. An extremely interesting element of the proposed solution in analysis is found in the Zodiac's use of the unit circle, a compass in the face of the watch with the solar noon. Solar noon is when the sun's path reaches its azimuth at 0 degrees. The author believes that the 0, where a 12 would normally be on the watch on the map, does carry the normal 369 o'clock mark where you would expect. The central mystery of Christianity is the Trinity, three things in one: God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost, or Holy Spirit. It is apparent to the author that this is the basic conceptual mechanic at play with the Zodiac's compass, unit circle, and watch face. Each of these three different devices has become the same thing, conceptually forming a 225-degree angle in three different understandings. The compass at hiker's heading of 225 degrees, the unit circle was the pure idea of 225 degrees or 4 radians, and the watch has a face time of sunrise, which is set at the time of sunrise on October 13th of 1970 at 7:15 a.m., where the hands of the watch form a 225-degree angle. In the same way, it is possible to separate God the Son from God the Father and God the Holy Spirit. If you don't do all three devices conceptually laid out into one another, then you cannot solve the Zodiac's two-part bond challenge for Mount Diablo. However, in Revelations, there is a different take on the Devil's Trinity, which is the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. Onward to the Zodiac Killer's Halloween card. I command you to give me your name, demon. One of the first things that jumps out when analyzing the card is the number 14 written on the hand of the skeleton on the front of the card. And again, written as 14, the number 4 in TEEN, on the inside of the card. The Zodiac Killer enjoyed that wordplay. In the Mount Diablo challenge, there was an uncanny recurrence of the number 13. Now in the Bible, this is interesting, as the number 13 is the number of lawlessness and rebellion. However, the number of 14 is a number of deliverance and salvation, so they have a very intentional use by the Zodiac Killer. But what is it? Well, inside the card, we have what appears to be a tree trunk with a hole in it, and there are 13 eyes, 9 arranged on the tree trunk itself and 4 next to the trunk, and when all the eyes are counted, they are totaled at 13. The eyeballs on the left hand show the number 3, 1, and 5 below. 13 appears to be a favorite number of the Zodiac, and it reoccurs in his communications, such as the 13-hole punch card, the Z13 cipher, and so on. Since the eyes are open on the tree, after some time the author begins to take the Zodiac Killer's special form of custom hieroglyphics to mean, open your eyes and look, see, or simply look, but look at what? We have a tree trunk, we have the message peekaboo, you are doomed, and we have a reverse tetragrammaton. The tetragrammaton appears in the book of Genesis, and we also have a tree and finishes in Revelations, where we have plenty of doom. When we have a revelation, we often say that it opened my eyes. So the author determined that the possible meaning behind being conveyed was look at Revelations 13, verses 1, 3, and 5. Number of eyes in 13, and discovered something interesting. Here are the verses. Revelations 13:1. And I stood upon the sand and saw a beast rise out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his 10 horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the name of blasphemy. 3. And I saw that his heads as if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. And there was given unto him a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given to him to continue for 42 months. 13:1 interpreted. The author found it interesting how these lined up with the aspects of the Zodiac Killer. The author has long thought that the Zodiac Killer used the lake berry as a costume at the murders committed at that location, and it was based on the sea slug beast that comes out of the Salton Sea, located in Riverside County, California, in the film The Monster That Challenged the World, and a Western star. The Zodiac was seemingly a big fan of TV and film. And I've had the opportunity to discuss this one with Spheri as well, and I just asked the question, what really do you mean by that? And he said that the Lake Berryessa costume, the hooded figure that attacked Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard on September 27th of 1969, 13 months before the mailing of the Halloween card, was a twofold creation. The top half is based on science fiction, The Monster That Challenged the World, and I guess we could call it the sea slug, but the monster, and the bottom half is based on either Tim Holt or just westerns in general. So these two elements of fiction that have been put together, and this is consistent with the Zodiac's narrative on borrowing ideas from not only works of literature and not only famous and classical ideas, but also pop culture ideas, childish ideas. And I mean childish in the youth sense, that these are just forms of entertainment that would be made easily available to young children. Comic books, science fiction, movies with outrageous characters. And I really think it's all up and down all across the spectrum with the Zodiac Killer. And that's my own observation. Some things are a little bit childish and immature, and other things are literary. And I've talked very frequently about how the Zodiac Killer could have also been heavily inspired by T.S. Eliot and The Wasteland. So the Zodiac's pretty much all over the map when it comes to interpretations and literature. 13:3. And I saw one of his heads, and if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. 13:3 interpreted. One of the more recent visible Zodiac suspects, Gary Francis Post, was selected to no small degree because of scars on his forehead that matched a forensic police sketch. The sketch shows a man who has scars on his forehead, and there was given unto him a mouth of speaking great things and blasphemy, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. Interpreted. This is the Zodiac speaking and speaking and speaking and speaking, but the interesting thing is that if one counts the Devil's Night murder of Sherry Jo Bates on October 30th of 1966, the Halloween card of October 27th of 1970, it is basically the Zodiac operating for 42 months, and he is wrapping up his big finale and going into a relatively silent period until 1974 for unknown reasons. Now let's take a look at the skeleton with the mark of the number 14 on his hand. 14 in the Bible is the number of salvation. The author proposes that the Zodiac places the number 14 on the hand of the skeleton, which is postured as the crucified Christ, and is mocking him and saying that Christ is the beast and the devil is salvation, that this is making a mockery of Christ's death and a path to salvation, and that Christ is the false prophet and that the Zodiac is the true Messiah. Before I lose you, consider the following about the crucified skeleton with the arms out, and his first seemingly arranged like these of almost any Christ figure on the crucifix. Jesus was crucified on Friday, Nisan 14, before sunset, or Passover. When was Passover in 1970? It started on April 20th of 1970 and ended on April 28th. In another head-shaking event, the Zodiac Killer's My Name Is Communication carries the date of April 20th, 1970, and the Dragon card was mailed on April 28th of 1970. One communication was the start of Passover, and the other communication was its ending. Passover observes remembrance of the exit from slavery and from Egypt toward freedom, while Jesus promised forgiveness of sin and entrance into paradise of his Father. Slaves in paradise intersect on the Halloween card, perhaps symbolically reconciling the freeing of slaves and their entry into paradise through the cross of Christ. But if that cross was somehow destroyed, and then there could be a new world where paradise has slaves in the Zodiac's version of the afterlife. Then there was the button letter where the Zodiac Killer asked everyone to start wearing his buttons. Now in Revelations 13:11, or 14, or 13:14, it reads, "And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth, by the means of those miracles which had power to do in the sight of the beast, and to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image of the beast which had a wound by sword, and did live." The Zodiac seems to be actively taking steps to fulfill the prophecies of the false prophet, to be seen to be the false prophet. He is not committing murders, he is performing miracles in the eyes of the beast. So his desire to have everyone wear buttons is consistent to gain the dragon's favor, to make him the false prophet. He is showing how worthy he is to the dragon. There seems to be multiple indicators that yes, that is exactly what is happening. A holistic look back at these revelations at the Zodiac's work. So as a result of the above, the author went back and looked at the proposed solution to the Mount Diablo 66 map code and Z32 cipher. In part 3 of the Moraga series, the author suggested that sunrise was at 7:15 a.m. on October 13th of 1970, and in progression at the time, this observation made the most sense given the way that the author perceived the Zodiac was striving for symmetry in the challenge. However, now after the analysis of the Halloween card, the author has been led to a more important and interesting realization. The clock hands make a 225-degree angle 2 times a day, AM and PM. And looking up when sunset occurred on Devil's Night of 1970, the same night things started with Sherry Jo Bates 4 years ago in 1966. Another inspiration for the 66 map ? It was discovered that the sunset on October 30th of 1970 was at 7:15 p.m., along with the line between Mount Diablo, the Moraga Chapel, the SFPD, so I considered 17:15 p.m. instead of 7:15 a.m., and the author feels it makes more sense than everything else because Christ was crucified at sunset, What would make more sense than to bring fire from the heavens and blow up the church devoted to Christ's mother to undo the birth of her only son while he's being crucified on Devil's Night, clearing the way so that the Zodiac can be the false prophet? In sum, this leads to the author to believe that from sending the My Name Is communication at the start of Passover on April 20th of 1970, the Zodiac Killer is moving through the beginning of the Bible, where God first gives his name, my name is blank, I am that I am, toward Revelations to fulfill the prophecy of the false prophet. The Zodiac is turning everything backward, including the name of God. He is marking the hand of the crucified Christ with the number 14 as the mark of the beast, which was to mark their hands or foreheads, taking the number of deliverance and salvation and mocking it, and he is sending a word of final warning of the close-out explosion that they can expect of the apocalypse. The Zodiac on Devil's Night, sunset October 30th, 1970, October 13th of 1970 at sunrise over by Mount Diablo's Moraga Chapel, over by Mount Diablo at the Moraga Chapel, excuse me. The Zodiac is attempting to be chosen to be by the beast to be the false prophet by the actions he makes to the blasphemy of God to change the outcome of heaven. The conclusion of the author. Do you understand how the Zodiac Killer weaves his layers in his conceptual system to hide in plain sight? The observer must elevate their perspective. They cannot constrain themselves to binary or black and white points of view. The Zodiac Killer has presented a symphony of symbolism. When you track down the Zodiac Killer, the floor of his labyrinth along the X and Y axis, you will not only run into dead end after dead end, you must elevate the Z axis and look over the whole design to see the truth. This must be an effort in humble progress, and not one of error or free protection. With time and iteration, the defects and observations will slowly be smoothed out, and the whole truth is not in a straight line, and it can not be pursued by reason alone. It requires faith and courage. The Zodiac Killer starts with the My Name Is communication with the San Francisco Chronicle on April 20th of 1970. So begins his design, which will cap off not with his name, but the tetragrammaton of the divine name of God backwards. So I guess his name clue is the devil. We first encounter the name of God as the Lord in Genesis 2:4. Then, the dragon card arrives on April 28th of 1970. The first two dates are significant in the design of the Zodiac Killer, because in 1970, they were the first and last days of Passover. Passover commemorates the Exodus and the deliverance of the Israelites from Egyptian slavery. The dragon card itself is significant because it introduces the dragon who appears in Genesis to tempt Eve, and it is the same dragon in Revelations. It is also where he introduces the fun of he will be having a blast, and he wants everyone to know about his bus bomb, and is asking people to start wearing buttons with his image. Revelations 13:14. Because of the signs, it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast to deceive the inhabitants of the signs and of earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast, who was wounded by the sword yet lived. On June 26th, on June 26th of 1970, the Zodiac Killer sends his button letter with the 66 map. The map coupled with the code will tell you where the bomb is set. But where was the bomb? Here is the Zodiac Killer intending to bring fire from the heaven for the world to see. Revelations 13:13. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from the heaven in full view of the people. The Zodiac Killer takes his bus bomb design, based on the mechanics of a solar eclipse, to the next level of the Devil's Mountain, the upside-down version of the Temple on the Mount, with the House of God, the Moraga Chapel, which was devoted to Mary, the Mother of Christ, and the SFPD. And then comes the Halloween card on October 27th of 1970 with the reversal of the name of God and backwards tetragrammaton. And this is where it starts to see the marbles that were previously spread across the floor begin to be held by the vase of truth. The card was dated on October 27th of 1970, 3 days before Devil's Night. This was the very night Sherry Jo Bates was murdered, October 30th, 1966. It is the belief of the author that the Zodiac killer's design, in reversing the resurrection of Christ, he is undoing the resurrection of Christ by running backwards. For when Christ died and rose again 3 days later, it went from devil's great victory to his defeat. So the Halloween card not only uses the bones of the crucified Christ to wish the world a happy Halloween, but it arrives 3 days before the Zodiac plans to detonate his bomb by blowing up a chapel devoted to the Mother of Christ, thereby symbolically undoing the birth of Christ as well. Most are familiar with the intersection of the words paradise and slaves, but the author has not heard much discussion on the identical intersection of the words boo and doomed, also on the Halloween card. The unit circle, the compass, and the watch all form an angle of 225 degrees on the solar watch, and it does that with hands at 7:15, and the author asserted originally sunrise in the AM, but it is not. With this new interpretation, it simply makes more sense that the intended time is 7:15 p.m. at sunset. Christ was crucified at sunset. The bomb was to go off not on October 13th, 1970 at 7:15 a.m., but on October 30th at 7:15 p.m. The Zodiac Killer is bookending his activities and walking from the first book of the Bible through the last. At the same time, Revelation 13:5, the beast was given a month to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. He is closing out what was started on October 30th of 1966 with Sherry Joe Bates and the sacrificial lamb, and is now reversing his evil with the symbolic crucifixion of Christ and the destruction of his birth on Devil's Night, who the Zodiac would simply have preferred not to have been born at all. The dragon is Satan, who works through earthly instruments to achieve his aims. The stars of heaven that the dragon threw to the earth, and the angels that followed Satan into the great war against heaven. They are the demons that operate on our earth. One way to understand why the name Zodiac is the Zodiac is because of the stars of heaven that are the demons that do the work of Satan on earth. And this is definitely a very bold theory that has been put forward by Sphere the Cube, also known as Sphere. And at this time, I would definitely invite you guys to provide your feedback and your responses. Now, because I do not endorse this theory, and this series is meant to respond to Sphere's claims and present them to you, and not only get your feedback, but I'll definitely share some criticisms that other people would have, because I've talked about the Zodiac Killer's Halloween card in the past. One of them comes from Tom Voigt of ZodiacKiller.com, who has said that people are reading way too much in the positioning of the skeleton on the Halloween card. It was pasted on, and it's just a simple basic novelty skeleton that was most likely positioned to look like it was hanging from the spider web, not any deeper meaning than that. And other people have questioned this about how, even though we're talking about possibilities, this isn't a proven fact, well, where did the pasted skeleton come from? Where did the pumpkin that was pasted on the other skeleton's body come from? There's more than one skeleton on the Halloween card. One of them has a pumpkin over his waist area. It doesn't take too much imagination to think about a little plastic envelope that could have been included with the card that would have had these stickers that could have been placed on the card, and that was just it, that someone decided to put them on there for an added effect, and they don't really have too much of a significant meaning. But I think that Sphere's observations and theories go way beyond the Halloween card, and talking about the Christian influences, slaves in the afterlife, talking about the book of Exodus, as well as everything you heard about the book of Revelations. And I'm rather undecided on that one because it requires just the accepting of the initial premise that the Zodiac Killer was heavily motivated by biblical observations. And it's possible that everything Sphere has said was true. Trying to become the devil, trying to overtake the name of the false prophet and make it his own, trying to do things that are even greater than the devil, the beast, becoming more powerful and they are the name of God written backwards, and that's why there's that particular symbol on the Halloween card. I mean, this is fascinating stuff, and it's brilliant stuff, and it really makes you wonder about the Zodiac Killer's word choices and his symbol choices. Was the Zodiac Killer heavily influenced by Christianity or biblical teachings? Like someone who grew up in a very strict religious household, that is a very defendable hypothesis. I absolutely give credit to Spheri for that. The counterbalance would be that the Zodiac Killer stole that symbol from Red Rider, and it's not even original. This whole thing about adding dots on there for any reason, that's just done for added effect. And speaking of added effect, Gary Francis Post, the suspect that was briefly mentioned in this episode, becomes a Zodiac suspect because of accusations that have been made by the casebreakers as well as Dale Julin, who have stated that Gary Post resembles the Zodiac Killer composite sketch, and he had scars on his forehead that are almost identical to the scars on the Zodiac Killer's forehead. But almost certainly the lines on the composite sketch's forehead are not scars. They're just additional details that have been shared by the artist, I repeat, the forensic artist, to show age and to fill the space, so it's not just a giant blank space on the forehead. So what do you think, though? Do you think that, I just have to ask that, like, what do you think about the observations about the deep meaning of artwork on the Halloween card? Or are these just things that the Zodiac Killer threw together that don't even have too much of a deep meaning? It was just a convenient thing. Put the pumpkin sticker on this way, put the skeleton sticker on this way, because it looks a little bit more frightening, for lack of a better term. And no, not actually frightening, like the way a Halloween decoration would be frightening. You're not actually scared. It's just amping up the decorations a little bit. Because in a similar piece that was written by Tom Voigt, he has examined the Halloween card firsthand and says it looks like a third grader made it. Or are you in a different camp with people who think that the Halloween card has some very detailed artwork and design, and that it has a very deep meaning? I mentioned Dale Julin briefly. He has a very elaborate solution to the artwork on the Halloween card. Like like several paragraphs of text could be extracted using his method, and that's all about the disappearance of Donna Lass. Some lines were included like "Bye bye birdie, time to fly." Nurse Donna Lass is up in a tree, and Kevin Robert Brooks has also made lots of observations about the Halloween card and how that everything has a specific meaning tied to his suspect Donald Lee Booyak. David Gold, also known as David Kuchar, has a lot of observations about how the symbols on the Halloween card reveal the name Frank Lee Morris's Zodiac suspect, and the 14's tied to Frank Morris's prison number. Lots of competing observations. But what do you think? I want to read your comments down below. Share anything you would like. Say what you think about the Zodiac Killer's Halloween card, and that's all for me now. I will see you on Zodiac Monday for the Zodiac Killer News Report, and anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box, and there was always BlackBoxNid88 over on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Goodbye.